So James Marcia is another theorist that kind of deals with social development, a little bit smaller and shorter than Erik Erikson, but still important. Your book doesn't talk about him too much, but he definitely can show up on the test. So James Marcia focused specifically on one part of development, and it's adolescence. So think about Erikson's stages. It was the fifth stage that dealt with basically adolescence and identity formation. But James Marcia did more research into how you would answer that question of who am I. So he talked about four identity states. He's not a stage theorist, though. He doesn't say that you start in one and then you go through the next three and end at achievement. Instead, he says that you can be in any one of these pretty much at any given time in your search for who you are. So I want you to think about each one of these, especially as they relate to yourself. So think about maybe there are topics or areas in your life where you might be in one identity state, but in other areas you're in another. And then in general, if you had to pick just one in terms of your search for identity related to all aspects of who you are, what would your identity state be? So just think about that as I kind of go over this quickly. So identity foreclosure happens when somebody prematurely commits to values or roles that other people prescribe. So this one I see in lots of different ways, especially, well, even in Verona. I definitely saw it in Monroe as well. People who are athletes, like maybe you're a pretty successful athlete, you're an athlete when you're younger, people start to treat you like an athlete. They only talk to you about like your athletic performance and things like that. Are you continuing your athletics in college? They're having all these conversations with you. And so you start to take ownership of that identity as an athlete. And so it becomes kind of a defining aspect of who you are. And you never really probably stop to think about, first of all, if that really is defining of who you are, but also all of the other aspects of yourself. So an example of that, in Monroe, I had that exact thing. I had a senior in class in social psych, and we were answering the question, who am I? And I said, Ellie, who are you? And she said, I'm an athlete. I said, yep. And then I said, let's keep going. Who are you? And she said, I'm healthy. And I said, yep. And she said, tall. Yep. I like to work out. Yep. And then she looked at me and said, Dom, I don't know what you're asking. And I said, oh, well, everything that you just said actually ties to your identity as athlete. So my question is, who are you outside of being an athlete? Like, who will you be or who would you be if we took the athletic status away from you? So if you could no longer play sports, who are you? How would people see you? How would they interact with you? Would you have the same status? Is that really all that you are? And so foreclosure can happen with like an athlete status. It can also happen with a sibling status. So maybe you've always been like the good kid or the troublemaker or the person who just doesn't get their stuff done on time. And suddenly that's just how your family interacts with you and maybe even how teachers interact with you or how your parents tend to like describe your behavior. So again, is that really who you are? Will you be that in college? Is that how you're going to be at work? I always find that really interesting in high school when people don't meet deadlines and parents are like, yeah, they just can't meet the deadline. They need more time. And then I wonder what job you're going to get where you don't have to meet a deadline or where your boss says, no, that's totally fine. I get that you always need more time for that deadline. So those are really interesting things to think about because yes, they're behavioral and yes, they're important and yes, they help you succeed maybe in high school, but has that become a part of your identity that's just been accepted? And is that really who you are and who you'll be in the future? The next one is identity moratorium, and that happens when a person delays commitment to an identity. So that means that you're in the process of like trying things out. This one's super active. So you're not just like, I have no idea who I am and I'm not going to do the work of figuring it out, but instead it's where you're trying out lots of things. So I hate the word experiment because I think people think you go off to college and you experiment with lots of things. That is not true. That's a movie. But when you go to college, you have lots of opportunities, right? They're going to ask you to take all different types of classes just to explore your interests. You have so many opportunities for joining a million different groups. So you're going to be around lots of different people, right? There's all these things. So if you choose to go to clubs that you wouldn't normally go to here in high school, and you choose to sit by people that maybe you wouldn't always sit by here in high school, and things like that. You choose to look at other religions. You choose to look at other political leanings or whatever it might be. then you're in moratorium. You might do that overall in terms of your identity, or there might be one place that you really like hone in on and you focus in on at a time. So, identity diffusion is when a person lacks a clear sense of identity but hasn't explored issues related to identity. So, you're not really sure who you are, but you're not doing the work of getting there. Okay? And I'm going to tie these last three together in a second. And then the last one is identity achievement. And that happens after you've considered multiple possibilities. And in the end, you commit to what your identity is and what your path forward is. So if you guys think about that, I've talked to you about that already, right? As seniors going out into the world, you no longer get to hide behind other people. So you have to have opinions. And when you have those opinions, you need to make sure that they're yours, because people are going to ask you about those opinions. And these people are going to be educated or pretend to be educated. So they're going to be looking for why you feel the way that you do. And it can't just come from your parents or guardians. It can't just come from your family or your upbringing. And to be honest, it can't just come from, well, that's what my religion believes. You have to know the why and the what. So I'll give you an example. I went to private school when I was growing up. It was private Lutheran school, and it was a really, really strict church. And so when I went to college, I kind of rebelled against that a little bit. So we went to church every Sunday growing up. And so my grandma would call me on the weekends, or my mom would call me on the weekends. And it would be like Sunday morning, and they would say, "Oh, am I catching you on your way to church or your way home from church?" And I would be like, "Nope." And they would be like, "Oh, did you go last night?" And I'm like, "Nope, haha." And I felt like I was like so cool being like, "Don't have to go, don't have to go." But I wasn't really doing the work of figuring it out. Okay. So I was probably in moratorium, is probably where I was at with that. Or even diffusion, because I wasn't really exploring lots of things. Actually, I was in diffusion there. However, what I decided to do was one day we were sitting around like in the dorm getting to know each other, and somebody asked, "What religion are you?" And I said, "Lutheran." And they said, "Oh, what do you like about being Lutheran?" And I said, "Nothing. Why?" And just like by saying it, I felt like, ah, crap. That sounded ridiculous, right? Like I literally responded Lutheran, but then I said that I didn't like being Lutheran. So it kind of made me think, like, when they ask me why I am who I am, if I'm not going to be the thing that I thought I was growing up, then I need to do the work of figuring out who I'm going to be moving forward. And I did that. I went to one of my roommates was very religious. And so I went to lots of different meetings with her of all different types of religions. I started taking religious studies classes and just really looking into it. And to be really honest, so that was the moratorium, right? I didn't know where I was at religiously or spiritually, but I was really doing the work of figuring it out. And to be honest, I didn't even figure that out until I was like 30 years old, right? That's when I was ready to like claim my religious identity, decide, what that was going to look like moving forward, and really take ownership of that. So that was achievement. So diffusion was when I said Lutheran, but I hadn't done the work, and I wasn't really necessarily taking ownership of being Lutheran. Moratorium was when I was doing the work, and then achievement was when I decided. So think about that politically, think about that religiously, think about that on a variety of social issues. And then additionally, think about overall where you're at in your search for identity.